Hello and welcome to World News on this Sunday morning. I'm Saria Strzemska. More than 100,000 protesters converged on Serbia's capital Belgrade Saturday in what could be the largest in a series of anti-corruption demonstrations that have upended the Balkan country in recent months. Our very own Don Arlev was on the ground and this is his report. Take a look.
After 3.5 months of constant protests in Serbia, of course, here the culmination in Belgrade is absolutely unbelievable. The amount of people that we have seen going throughout the streets and, of course, gathered at one of the main squares in the city is like nothing I've ever seen before. Some of the estimates that we've heard tonight are as low as 500,000 and some exceed around 800,000 people could be here. Of course, people descended from all over the country on the capital to protest the government, to protest President Alexander Vučić and his control of what these protesters claim is a corrupt regime. We talked to some of the people today, of course, and they told us what they thought about the current situation and how long they would protest here and around the country. Take a listen.
We're here to support students, to support justice, and not to provide violence, not to provocate people here. We are just here for the peace, for the love, and that's everything.
I can say for sure that our fight will definitely continue until we see results and until we see full results. The biggest thing we see is that basically this whole system is corrupt down to its very core.
The solution is to change the power. You know, there must be some democratic influences in power, not to be in hands of one party and the one man.
Now, on Friday night, there were also large protests here in the city. Saturday, obviously, as well. Whether these protests will continue in Belgrade itself, well, we'll just have to see on Sunday. Reporting from Belgrade, Don Arlev, TVP World.
And we continue on the topic of Serbia. President Vučić is politically finished, said Professor Tanja Domi of Columbia University in an interview with TVP World when explaining the situation in Serbia. She further explained that there is no precedent for the countrywide student demonstrations, as Vučić hasn't been able to quell them in any way.
In my conversations with people in Belgrade, they are enthralled, they are thrilled, and according to accounts I'm hearing, is that the EU has more or less behind the scenes warned Mr. Vučić, if you turn on guns against the people, you are done. But a lot of people believe on the street and that are analysts on Serbia, they believe that President Vučić has run his game, and this game is not going to deliver a win for him. He is essentially, in the view of many people, he is politically finished, especially if he turns to violence.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Saturday in a third such call since Trump took office. During the call, Rubio informed Lavrov about U.S. military action against the Houthi rebels and discussed the next steps in the Ukraine peace talks. A State Department spokesperson said Rubio and Lavrov agreed to continue working towards restoring communication between the United States and Russia. The call took place 2 days after Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff visited Moscow to discuss peace talks and push for a 30-day ceasefire agreement. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that while he supports the idea of a ceasefire, certain issues need to be resolved before the truce can take effect. Ukraine has agreed to implement the truce earlier this week. Tens of thousands of Hungarians rallied in the capital Budapest against Prime Minister Viktor Orbán on Saturday. The leader of the surging opposition Tisza party, Péter Magyar, pledged to make Hungary part of a strong Europe and bring an end to Orbán's rule.
The Hungarian people at last are making their voice heard. From the Turks to the Austrians, the Russians to the Orbáns, all tried to silence that voice and terrorize to shut their mouths. But we have good news. They did not succeed before, and they will not succeed now either. Hungary wants to live again. Spring is coming, the spring of the Hungarians, and together we will put an end to the winter of Orbán.
Hungarians who stand against Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's politics haven't stooped to his rhetoric of calling political opponents insects and adopted a more positive message, according to Hungarian MEP Zoltán Tár. He also noted that it is crucial to get the opposition's message through, especially amid an increased activity of government mouthpieces and social media trolls.
And obviously, we have to, just like in Poland, we also have to take care of many other aspects of society. First of all, the life of the media. We don't have free media at the moment. The state media is controlled by the government and only telling what the government tells them to say, which makes it impossible for us to reach the people. So we are using social media to do that, but they are also coming up and introducing trolls and all kinds of bots in order to break down our activities in the social media.
Operations of the U.S. Agency for Global Media are to be slashed to a minimum required by law. Donald Trump signed an executive order hitting the agency responsible for Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe, and Voice of America news outlets. The New York Times reports that this is another decision that tests the limits of his powers, as the executive order could effectively mean dismantling an institution established by an act of Congress. The president has previously made similar decisions against a number of other institutions, including U.S. aid agency, resulting in a paralysis of its operation. Outlets including Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe are aimed especially at societies of undemocratic regimes, which lack unbiased media in their countries. The coalition of the willing is now moving to an operational phase, says British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, urging to apply collective pressure to Putin. The Ukraine ceasefire deal is still on the table, with Donald Trump fairly optimistic, despite Vladimir Putin ramping up demands. However, if the peace deal is not reached, large-scale sanctions and tariffs on Russia are still possible.
Mr. President, obviously you're...
While Donald Trump is still hopeful of a positive response from Moscow.
I feel that Russia is going to make a deal with us, I hope.
The British Prime Minister urged a group of 25 leaders to defend a peace deal that might be reached in Ukraine through a coalition of the willing.
We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table.
On Friday, Vladimir Putin said the idea of a ceasefire was correct and that Russia supported it. But he laid out a set of issues that needed to be resolved before the truce would come into force.
Now we'll let Russia show its true intentions. Do they really want peace, or are they just empty words to prolong the talks? Now, this pressure must be exerted, pressure both economic and political on Russia to achieve a just peace.
One of the issues Putin laid out were Ukrainian soldiers in the Russian Kursk region. Putin offered to spare them if only they laid down their arms.
For the effective implementation of the U.S. president's call, a corresponding order from the military political leadership of Ukraine is necessary for its military units to lay down their arms and surrender.
Steve Witkoff, who led the negotiations in Moscow on Thursday, had to wait 8 hours to meet with Putin, Sky News reported. Little has so far been disclosed following the late-night talks.
If the Russians don't agree, it means that they don't agree not with our proposal, but specifically with President Trump's proposal.
The proposal includes several provisions pushed through by the Ukrainians. They concern the exchange of prisoners of war and the return of abducted Ukrainian children to their homeland.
Many people these days do not have experience with Soviet diplomacy anymore, but the Soviet diplomacy approach is what we are seeing. So you say yes, but what you mean is no, and then you say yes, but there's a little nuance, and the little nuance is Ukraine has to give up, and then I may be ready for ceasefire and peace. So I do not expect Putin to agree with anything.
The question now is what Donald Trump will do if it becomes clear that the intention to end the war is simply not there.
Putin is playing like he's the victim here, demanding security guarantees so that the Ukrainians won't attack his troops. This is absolutely absurd, and the Trump White House needs to bring the hammer of economic sanctions down on Moscow if they continue to play games like this.
Hello, everybody.
Donald Trump has threatened Russia with large-scale sanctions and tariffs if a peace deal is not reached.
At least 31 people have been killed and more than 100 were injured in U.S. airstrikes on Yemen's Houthi rebels in the largest military operation since Trump took office. The U.S. president ordered the attack in retaliation for the group's Saturday attacks on Red Sea shipping lanes. The spokesperson for the Houthi-run health ministry said that most of the victims were women and children, and the group's political bureau described the attack as a war crime. The strikes targeted the Houthi stronghold Sana'a, as well as military sites in the southwestern city of Taiz and a power station. More strikes are expected to follow, and President Trump has warned the Houthis' main backer, Iran, that it will face dire consequences if it doesn't withdraw its support for the group. According to the Pentagon, the Houthis have attacked U.S. warships and commercial vessels more than 300 times since 2023. The group explains the attacks as a show of solidarity with the Palestinians. Thousands of Romanians marched in the streets of Bucharest on Saturday to protest the rise of the far right. Romania is headed to a presidential election rerun in May. A sea of Romanian and EU flags could be seen in the Romanian capital as protesters took to the streets to show their support for European values. Romania has been experiencing a political crisis ever since last year's presidential election, when pro-Russian candidate Călin Georgescu won the first round, but the vote was annulled because of accusations of Russian meddling. Georgescu, who has denied any link to Russia, has been barred from taking part in the rerun. The election is likely to be contested. And we continue on the same topic. Former Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has endorsed far-right candidate George Simeon in Romania's upcoming presidential election. Last year's ballot was annulled over unresolved financing of a pro-Russian candidate who won the election. The endorsement by Morawiecki, who leads the European Conservatives and Reformists groups in the European Parliament, has been criticized by Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
In Bucharest, Morawiecki endorsed George Simeon for president of Romania. He is the leader of the openly pro-Russian and anti-European AUR party. Romania is a key partner in defending the eastern border of the EU and NATO. They're no longer even pretending.
Dog lovers and adrenaline seekers have gathered in a southwestern Polish village near Opole for dog dryland races. The dog sled racing teams compete on wheels instead of sleds, reaching speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour. Take a look.
It starts with one dog, so I'll go running sometimes. With this, you can quit all sorts of addictions because having a dog introduces a healthy lifestyle. It's impossible not to love dogs, and this is the kind of sport that is addictive. Once we have a sled dog and teach it to run, we are unable to stop for the rest of its life, unless you are totally unsympathetic because that dog wants to work with us. They live an average of 15 until the age of 10, 11, 12. They are generally active and require us to move. That's why it makes a person healthier, because they move all the time, and the dog is healthier and it lives longer.
I love these competitions for the smiles on the dog's mouths, for the scream we hear when they are excited before the start, for the speed, the adrenaline, the fact that you never know what's going to happen, because they are animals after all and they have their own ideas.
And that's our Foreign News Bulletin, but do stay tuned. World Talks coming up next.